I'm just still wondering whether seems like it's happening all the time because we happen to catch video of it, or if it's just something it's just going on all the time, that people are getting their cars vandalized.
I think, having cars being keyed is just something that sort of happens in general. And if you don't have a camera in the car, but you don't have any video proof.
I always pictured keying was like juveniles, like teenagers, kids that had nothing better to do, like on dares and stuff. What we've been seeing so far on these cams, at least the ones that have been caught on Sentry Mode, has been, I don't know, people I wouldn't have expected. Moms, adults, like
people with fully developed frontal cortexes.
Right.
That seems a little strange. I guess it just takes more stories like this so that these idiots finally hear, oh, I guess I shouldn't key a Tesla because it might see me.
It's just sad. It makes me depressed to be, sharing
again,
the planet with them.
It's the same thing would happen if you were watching the 24-hour news cycle. You'd be like, oh my gosh, there's all these murderers and accidents and fires and it's all bad. It's only because you're actually starting to see this stuff. Most of the time, it's just nobody hears about it. Nobody talks about it.
What if Elon turns on vigilante mode and the cars all share data amongst each other? They find out where these people live because they're driving around everywhere, and they're just go find them and get them.
That sounds very terrifying and Orwellian, but I mean, sure, maybe you could have the car that it would actually just, how hard would it be to identify it being keyed or something like that and just start moving? It would freak people out. At the very least, it would freak them out, so maybe they would stop keying your car.
Also, if they're going to use a key which is metallic and conducts electricity, why not electrocute them?
I don't think that, again, the Tesla isn't necessarily the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I don't think it can do that.
Nautilus mode. I like it.
I'm just saying, I think that the only reason we're actually seeing the craziness that is happening to these cars is because we actually get to see it. Yeah. Normally, I think this is just happening all the time, and we were just, so some person might say it, but it's not as interesting as a video where you get to see two boneheads, vandalize a car.
All right, so get this. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, found that direct and indirect subsidies for coal, oil, and gas in the U.S. reached $649 billion in 2015. Do you know what that number means? I know it's hard to wrap your head around a big number like $649 billion.
It's like $500 billion.
Do you know what the U.S. spent on something else similar in 2015?
I don't know, like paper clips, like what? I don't know.
That's what the U.S. spent on the Pentagon. All of our military spending in 2015 was $599 billion.
Wait, you said 599, but you had just said 649.
Yeah, we spent more to subsidize oil, gas, and coal in 2015 than we did on our entire military budget. We could have had an entire other Pentagon, an entire other military, Air Force, Marines, Army, Navy, but we didn't. We subsidized oil and gas. And in fact, our own M3 Chris, who's on our Discord, he ran the numbers. He said the average American household sends $5,200 per year in taxes to oil companies, and that our current gas price is about $2.60 a gallon, but our taxes compensate for $4.76 a gallon. So our gas price should be $7.36 a gallon. When you go to get gas for your car, you should be paying $7.36, but you're not, because we've all, through our taxes, silently, quietly, been subsidizing them.
So, okay. So, hang on. So you're saying, first of all,
I know, it's hard to
we could have had two militaries.
Yeah.
Full-size militaries. Aircraft carriers and
tanks.
Helicopters.
Yep. Drones.
And fighter jets.
And armies of men and women.
Tanks and armored personnel carriers and guns and rockets and bombs and all of that. We could have had two.
Yep.
And still had $50 billion left over.
Yep.
$50 billion.
Do you understand now why the oil and gas and coal industry is A, as powerful as they are, and B, why they don't want to give it up? Because picture this. If you're getting $649 billion every year, okay?
So that money is not from selling the oil.
No. That is just subsidies. That's the subsidy part.
Them.
Yeah, just handed to them. So do you think they want to give that up?
In a year.
In a year. I know. They don't want to give that up. Why do you think they're fighting so hard to keep companies like Tesla down? Why do you think the FUD storm is always so strong? Because if you were earning $649 billion, do you think you'd go, you know what? When it runs out, we'll just we'll be fine with it. We'll live without it.
And again, if all cars become electric and there's no more pumps and stuff like that. I mean, first of all, we'd be crazy to continue subsidizing oil companies the way we do.
Of course.
They wouldn't be making any money at the pump. The only thing that you could possibly use, petroleum products for would be, petroleum jelly, lubricants, and I guess pesticides and fertilizer, maybe.
Right.
It's such a smaller market.
Right.
Energy for oil and gas and energy for transportation specifically would just disappear.
Right.
Coal as well.
Yeah.
We could have
So whenever
I'm constantly I'm like, military budget's ridiculous. We don't need these,
fighter jets
we don't need
and
these
stuff,
fighter
right?
jets we're spending billions of dollars on. But seriously, that's who cares? Keep it.
Right.
If we could double the military.
Well, and think of all the jobs. If we took that money and put it into solar and wind energy, for instance, then you would have so many people working.
This is the problem, is that the human mind, you give someone a number like $649 billion, and someone's just like, okay, $649 billion. I can repeat that words back to you. That's my brain do that. My brain do that good. Me can do that. But you can't just be like, oh, holy crap, you cannot imagine that. You would have to be like Rain Man to be like, what? $649 billion?
Yeah.
It's just...
All right, well, this new study from the Capgemini Research Institute suggests that consumer acceptance of self-driving cars, and you know what? I want to stop right there. Self-driving cars. I've been hearing this term over and over, autonomous driving cars, self-driving cars. We need an acronym. It just takes too long to say it. Okay. How about autonomous driving vehicles, ADVs?
What about AVs, autonomous vehicles?
Well, AV sounds like the audiovisual club, at school, like AV club.
That's not.
No,
that doesn't exist anymore. Sorry.
So you want to call it?
Sorry, it doesn't happen. They don't not know what it's called.
There's no AV clubs anymore?
I don't know.
I think there are. But anyway, you want to call them AVs? Comment below what we should call them, because I think autonomous driving vehicles is too long in general. We need something shorter to call them, Everything else has got to...
We call them EVs. We don't call them EDVs. We call them EVs.
Okay, whatever.
AVs, EVs. That's the only problem is that AVs and EVs sounds kind of similar, but at least it's not volt.
You don't want the volt problem.
Yeah, I know. But still, it's...
Help us out.
Yeah.
Comment below.
Let's figure it out.
But anyway, consumer acceptance of self-driving cars in the U.S. will increase over time. That's what this new study found that consumers seem to be saying. So the preference for riding in autonomous driving vehicles is set to double in the next 10 years. So only 30% of those surveyed would prefer to drive in a self-driving car today over a traditional vehicle. But by 2029, the study found that 63% would prefer this method. So
they built a time machine and they went into the future, and then they asked them in the future in 2029? How do they know this?
They just asked them, today, would you want to drive in an autonomous driving car? Or how do you feel about doing that 10 years from now?
And people were like, oh, well, in 10 years from now.
Isn't that funny?
And here's weird. I mean,
I know.
How do you know what you want in 10 years?
I know. Isn't that weird? I know. It's a weird...
Okay.
But it tells you a lot about people.
It does. And
here's a list of things that people said they would like to do when they're in autonomous driving cars. So, I mean, look at this. They said they'd like to eat while driving, shop while driving, catch up with family and friends, listen to music. But then even things I didn't even think they would think of, like sleep. I mean, they kind of realized that they'll be able to go to sleep in the cars. I think this is great that some people are actually wrapping their mind around that it's going to change life.
So I just got my dream case, and we're going to have a whole video, probably series on it, because I'd love it.
Do you remind people what the dream case is?
It's a bed for the back of your Tesla. I was in the back, and I was like, I could put it in summon mode. So I did. Put it in summon mode. I'm sitting in bed, and the car moves. And I was like, this is so cool. How long before I'm just summoning it,
across the country.
And I can just be like,
I know, it's going to happen.
I can sleep while it's doing that.
It's going to happen soon.
Play checkers, do whatever I want while I'm moving.
I know.
Most people are just not thinking about cars in this way.
And this leads really well into an interview I had with Rahul Sanad. He's the CEO and founder of Tesloop, which is that company that we've all heard of that drives from, LA to Las Vegas and to San Diego in Teslas. And we had a really cool interview about Autonomy Day and all the autonomous cool features that are coming out. And he really grasps it. Here's a short excerpt from that interview. Do you think one of the reasons why so many analysts and Wall Street people have trouble believing Elon is because they look at all the competition and they see that the competition is using a completely different model of how to do it. And they think to themselves, well, if Google and Cruise and all these other companies are doing it with LiDAR and in small, restricted pre-map spaces, and you, Tesla, are doing it completely differently, that you must be wrong because you're going against the bigger way of doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a cycle where and you could tell this happened like at Autonomy Day where somebody's like, well, we talked to somebody and they said they have a lot of simulation miles, so isn't that right? And if you're not like really into it, you don't, know what really matters. And I would put myself in that category. I'm like a casual observer of autonomy technology, but I actually don't, either work in the space or really deeply technically understand it or anything. And I think most analysts are probably not much farther ahead than I am. And so they talk to 10 companies. And then I think what's most important, and this is like pervasive, is that when you work at a big company and the company's livelihood is based on some technology, it could be, I used to work at Microsoft, it was Windows. Like the idea that Linux would beat Windows was obviously wrong. The idea that iPhone would sell for $500 was ridiculous. Like that those just were not like sensible views to hold like in the early 2000s at Microsoft. And so you get this psychology. People use Nokia and BlackBerry as examples where I was in the phone space and I'd go to conferences and be like, "Ooh, isn't the iPhone cool?" And they'd be like, "No, you can do everything there on the Nokia. You can look up the internet. You can do a Google thing here. I'll show you how to do it." Like nobody could do it. They could do it, but it's this like psychological, it's like an economic psychological brainwashing. I think there's a fundamental behavioral characteristic that we should name where if your livelihood depends on it and there's no easy way to switch boats, you're going to stick with your thesis, even if it's wrong, until it's like definitively proven wrong. Like it would be so easy for Tesla to say, we'll add LiDAR,
Right. We'll shut you up and we'll add it.
But they're like, that's absolutely not their MO. I mean, to me, this is the closest analogy here was like hydrogen. Like, again, in 2012, 2013, Toyota's all about hydrogen. And, in earnings call, somebody's like, well, Toyota's investing all this in hydrogen. Can you explain that? And they're like, no, we're totally confused. It makes no sense at all. They will realize that at some point, like it's just beyond belief. And to me, like LiDAR is the new hydrogen. It's they've just definitively convinced themselves that that's wrong. Now, I don't think it means that there's no chance they're wrong, but in their minds, they're already there. Like their track record on meeting deadlines is horrible, but their track record on picking the right technologies and making the right bets, both economic and technical, is nearly flawless.
So the full interview comes out on Thursday, so make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell button so that you won't miss it, because he has such great insights into what's going on with Tesla's autonomy and robotaxi technology.
So over the years we've been doing this show, we've been talking about Volkswagen's CEO, Herbert Diess, and he's gone from being like, diesel's the solution, to this.
So recently he said on the Die Welt podcast, I hope that Tesla survives because it is, of course, an incentive and an impulse for us. We are big, we are global, and we also have advantages in scaling, starting up factories, and rolling out the business. This will be our chance in the next few years. We will win.
And so what he's talking about here is basically the switch to EVs. Finally, after all these years of being like, EVs can never replace gas cars, consumers simply won't want it because of the convenience, and then going on to be like, diesel is so much more efficient than all other forms of transportation. He's finally said, okay, we're going to EVs. And VW as a whole has said that they are going to be transitioning to EVs.
Yeah, I mean, he agrees with Elon. He said that he personally does not see an alternative to electrification in the next 10 years. And when he's speaking about fuel cell vehicles, Dice argued that it would take 2 to 3 times as many windmills and solar modules to make the technology work. So he agrees that fuel cells aren't going to work, hydrogen fuel cells, and that electrification is the answer for the next 10 years.
Which is what Elon has been saying from the onset, which is great.
And we had a lot of pushback last week to things that we said about the ID.3, which is the new ID platform car that they're coming out with, and they pre-sold 10,000 units of. We were kind of down on VW because they put a limit of 30,000 as their first production run of the ID. And a lot of people were like, why are you down on that? They're trying to produce as many as they can. And I guess my problem is, in 2018, VW produced 10.8 million vehicles. That's how many vehicles they sold in just last year.
Wow.
So producing 30,000 cars for them is easy peasy stuff.
It should be like, oops, I produced 30,000 cars.
Right.
Whoops. It should be that easy for them.
Right. I mean, even Tesla, who's a fledgling auto company, they produced 30,000 Model 3s in 1 month. For VW to say, we're not even going to scale up to 100,000 cars by 2022, it's like, What?
I thought that you just said that there's no alternative to electrification,
Right.
and your, Model 3 killer isn't going to be coming out in any sort of numbers. So, the good news is that they are finally talking the talk in terms of electrification. However, it seems like, whether they want to or not, they can't really walk the walk.
Right.
And it all really, really, really comes down to battery cell manufacturing.
Right.
None of these companies have invested heavily enough in battery manufacturing, which means that, the e-tron is being delayed by battery manufacturing. And so is basically all of the other car manufacturers. They're not able to put out enough cars in any sort of quantity.
And they ignore the two most important aspects of this new revolution that we're having in EVs, which is the charging network, which they hardly ever discuss, and autonomy.
Right.
So even if they can produce enough batteries and come up with enough cars, these cars aren't going to have the level of autonomy that Tesla has in them, and they're not going to have places to charge.
I would argue that, VW is being forced to create a charging network just because of Dieselgate.
Sure.
They have been forced to create a charging network, such as Ionity and Electrify America in the United States. So I think that, that might at least be taken care of just because governments had to punish VW somehow.
Okay, it's not a great network. Compared to the Tesla Supercharger network, it's pretty piddly, but okay.
At the moment, it should be hopefully growing.
I'm just saying by 2022, 2023, you're not going to want a car that doesn't have autonomy in it. But speaking of autonomy, Nissan agrees with Elon.
So there have been a lot of articles coming out recently that are like, basically some journalist watched or read an article about Autonomy Day, and they were like, oh great, a perfect article would be, is Elon really right about not using LiDAR? Because everyone's using LiDAR. Hello? You should be using LiDAR. Is Elon right? And they have a article where basically they find some expert who's like, you should really be using LiDAR. And then they go, who knows? I've seen so many of those articles, and it's very frustrating because none of them really dive too deep into the issues. They're just basically talking to a guy who's been working on LiDAR for a very long time, who's like, oh, LiDAR is really it's really the way to go, and you can't do it without LiDAR. And it's like, yeah, you're a LiDAR expert, dude.
Right.
Of course you'd say that. But Nissan has just backed Elon in the LiDAR versus vision debate.
At the moment, LiDAR lacks the capabilities to exceed the capabilities of the latest technology in radar and cameras. It would be fantastic if LiDAR technology was at the level that we could use it in our systems, but it's not. There's an imbalance between its cost and its capabilities. And that is a quote from the General Manager of Advanced Technology Development for Automated Driving at Nissan headquarters, Tetsuya Ijima.
Right. And so basically, there was a question about autonomy. How are you going to be accomplishing this? They said that they were going to be using radar and cameras, the same thing that Tesla's using. And the question, of course, because the question always gets asked, well, what about LiDAR? You got to be using LiDAR. It's nice to actually have another voice that is not Elon being like, yes, cameras and radar.
Now, it's been all over the news this week. Preliminary data has come out from the NTSB about the Model 3 autopilot crash that happened in Delray Beach in Florida, where a Model 3 hit a trailer and the top of the car was sheared off. NTSB stated, as the Tesla approached the private driveway, the combination vehicle pulled from the driveway and traveled east across the southbound lanes of US 441. The truck driver was trying to cross the highway's southbound lanes and turn left into the northbound lanes. According to surveillance video in the area and forward-facing video from the Tesla, the combination vehicle slowed as it crossed the southbound lanes, blocking the Tesla's path. The Tesla struck the left side of the semi-trailer. The roof of the Tesla was sheared off as the vehicle underrode the semi-trailer and continued south. The Tesla came to a rest on the median about 1,600 feet from where it struck the semi-trailer. The 50-year-old male Tesla driver died as a result of the crash. The 45-year-old male driver of the combination vehicle was uninjured. They go on to say, preliminary data from the vehicle show that the Tesla's autopilot system, an advanced driver assistance system that provides both longitudinal and lateral control over vehicle motion, was active at the time of the crash. The driver engaged the autopilot about 10 seconds before the collision. From less than 8 seconds before the crash to the time of impact, the vehicle did not detect the driver's hands on the steering wheel. Preliminary vehicle data show that the Tesla was traveling about 68 miles per hour when it struck the semi-trailer. Neither the preliminary data nor the videos indicate that the driver or the autopilot system executed evasive maneuvers.
So this is a lot of information, and we just want to kind of break it down a little bit. So I think that the important thing here is that autopilot was enabled. It was enabled about 10 seconds before the crash. And 10 seconds when you're driving is actually quite a long time.
Yep. And that the driver's hands were not on the wheel for 8 seconds before the crash.
Right.
So what I think is important to see here is that this was the first time during this trip that autopilot was engaged by the driver. So 10 seconds before the crash happened, that's the first time he engaged autopilot. And here's my thinking. I don't have all the data, but my thinking is if he put it into autopilot and didn't see that truck in front of him, that he put it into autopilot so that he could do something. We've all kind of been guilty of this, right? Mm-hmm. You put it into autopilot so that you can look away for a second to grab something or whatever. And my best guess, is that he put it into autopilot so that he could do something like look at a map or grab a phone or something. He didn't look up, wasn't paying attention, and his car hit the truck. Now, the key thing to remember here is that this level of autopilot, level 2 autonomy, is a driver assist function. And so you should never put a car at this stage of autopilot into autopilot and then go do something else.
Right.
You should always stay the driver of the car. So, is it Tesla's fault? No. It's the driver's fault.
It states very clearly, as soon as you enable autopilot, it is still a beta feature. They are still working on it. There are still updates on it. It's not complete because when it's complete, it's going to be level 5. And often we talk about the level 5 autonomy. It's not level 5 now. It is level 2. It is a driver assist function. You are still the driver of the car. You have this little assistant who's helping you, but the assistant is not the driver.
Think of it this way. You put it into autopilot, that's the equivalent of putting a 16-year-old behind the wheel. It's as if you had a second wheel over here where the passenger is, and I was like, dong dong. So my 16-year-old is now driving the car. If I choose to stupidly take my eyes off the road while my 16-year-old is driving, I should expect there's going to be an occasional problem because it's a 16-year-old driving.
Right. It's a lot like those student driver cars.
Right.
Yes, you have the student driver who is driving the car. We don't have advanced technology to allow 2 steering wheels, but there is the extra brake.
Right.
And that is why you have the student driver instructor sitting next to the driver of the car,
right,
because they are ultimately responsible for what the car does.
Now, a lot of people will say, Elon, you're not on high moral ground here. You can't let people behind the wheel while you keep testing your system out. But here's the thing. Let's look at the data because we have tons of it now. The number of miles driven on autopilot is now 1.356 billion miles. So that's how many miles have been driven in autopilot, and we know how many deaths there have been in Teslas driving on autopilot. There have been 4 in the world. So if we do the math, we see that there's 1 death for every 339 million miles driven in autopilot. Mm-hmm. Now let's compare that data to the number of deaths on U.S. roads last year with cars that have no autopilot. So NHTSA's data shows that there were 40,000 U.S. traffic deaths last year with 3.2 trillion miles driven.
So that's 1 death for every 80 million miles driven.
So remember what we said before, cars driven on autopilot, on Tesla autopilot, there was 1 death for every 339 million miles.
Right.
So let's compare that number to make it make sense.
What that means is that driving on Tesla autopilot is 4.2 times safer than driving manually.
Right. So Elon can easily say, I am on high moral ground. You get into a car and you put it on an autopilot, you're 4.2 times safer than the average driver in the United States. And let's try and wrap your head around that number better. That means that instead of last year there being 40,000 deaths on the road, what if everyone had been driving in a Tesla autopilot car with autopilot engaged? How many deaths would have been saved?
30,513. That's how many are saved. That's not how many deaths there would be. That's how many lives would have been saved if everyone had been driving on autopilot. Now, of course, not everyone. You can't just turn on autopilot and, go take all sorts of turns and stuff like that. But statistically, if we look at this statistically, if everyone had been driving on Tesla autopilot last year, we would have saved the same number of people that live in Poughkeepsie, New York, an entire town. Imagine for a moment you have the option to save an entire town from being destroyed by a meteorite, right? You know that it's happening, you evacuate the whole town, and you save all those lives. That is what autopilot is. It's literally 4.2 times safer with the current data that we have.
But do you realize what the media does?
Right.
The mass media puts out this story, keeps showing you a death in a Tesla, and doesn't give you the context.
Right.
So you have no way to judge. You're just like, oh, I don't know. I've been hearing a lot about deaths in Teslas. There have been 4 on autopilot. And at the same time, there have been hundreds and thousands of deaths that had nothing to do with autopilot, that were in just regular cars. We have 40,000 deaths in the U.S. every year. But you know what? Let's not just think about the U.S. In the world, there are over 1 million deaths every year.
And I also want to point out that these 4 deaths have happened in the past 3 years on different versions of autopilot. Autopilot has been getting progressively better, and there have been more and more Teslas on the road.
Right. I mean, we gave you this number to give you some sense of what's going on, but it's actually way safer than that. It's just we wanted to be ultra conservative.
Right. These are bulletproof numbers. Anyone can do their own research. With 4 deaths and the number of autopilot miles, and again, we're putting the sources down below. You can go see Lex Friedman's numbers on the number of autopilot miles that Tesla has, and you can go look at NISTA's data on U.S. traffic deaths, and you can also find the number of miles that Americans drive every year.
Yeah.
And you can put that all together. We did that. It's not like we have some access to some magic, sorcery statistical textbook. No. This took maybe 10 minutes of Googling. I am so mad that not all other forms of media decided to do that. None of them did that. No one does the math.
They don't want to do the math. They want to give you the FUD.
Right.
So on our recent Model 3 Euro road trip, I was in Amsterdam and I visited Anne Kloppenborg. He's the founder and CEO of New Electric, a company that converts cars and boats from ICE to all electric. So fascinating and inspiring. Here's a short clip, but we released the full interview last week and you should really watch it. All right, we're about to arrive at New Electric in Amsterdam, and I found out about Anne and New Electric when I was watching Fully Charged. And the second I saw it, literally the second I saw the episode, I dropped what I was doing, emailed Anne, and I was like, I'm going to be in Europe. I have to meet with you. Now, you can imagine when that episode came out, so many people must have reached out to him. I know they did. So he probably got just inundated with emails. So for a little while, I didn't hear from him, and I was like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. And then he reached out and said, sorry, I was just wading through the bazillions of emails that came in. I saw your email. I definitely want to meet. And so we're going to go meet him, and I'm so excited that we are. So can I just tell you?
Yeah.
Not a joke. I saw you on Fully Charged.
Yeah.
I was watching the video. About halfway through, I stopped the video and started, and I was like, "Please!" And I wasn't the first to watch it. Like, it wasn't the day it came out, so I was like, "Crap! I know that 1 million people are contacting you."
Everybody's doing it. Yeah,
and you were must have gotten deluged from.
No, for sure. We're still kind of picking up because it's always the same thing. It's like a small company, not enough time, and then suddenly you clamor for a bit of attention, you get it, and then there's no way that you have the kind of organization that can nicely funnel all that attention into something functional. But we try.
Well, tell me about the attention that you got. Did you get lots of people who were like, I want my Jaguar to have a motor in it?
It's a whole combination of things. I mean, a lot of people just really reaching out and saying like, hey, you guys are doing a great job.
That's awesome.
Keep it up, or thanks for like doing something inspirational. And I got to tell you that, that's just like manna. Getting that response now really shows that there's a lot of people ready for this message. And it used to be a little bit different. it's either, there was maybe the tree hugger aspect, or there was, but otherwise there wasn't really much going on for electrics. If the message is that gas and, all combustion engines are bad and they're polluting, then the message is that people are doing the wrong thing. And that is immediately going to lead to a response like, heck no, I didn't even have a choice.
Right.
And now you're blaming me for stuff.
Yeah.
I'm getting angry.
Yep.
So whatever you're saying after this,
I don't want to hear you.
I'm like all riled up and I'm not going to like you.
Yep.
And so the message really has to be like, we all had no choice. We understand. Look at this cool new shiny toy, and then try and walk away from the past.
I love that. So it's okay that you owned a Jaguar.
Fantastic.
Now, as I was talking to some people in Belgium the other day, a friend of mine said that his father has a 1999 Stratus, Dodge Stratus, and it's sitting in the garage, can't do much with it, something's broken or whatever, but he loves the car. Obviously, I think everyone probably at some point or other has a car like that. Tell our viewers, what can be done with that 1999 Dodge Stratus?
Well, the reality is it doesn't need to go, and there's different ways of going. I mean, there's going to be us or some other places where you can basically drop off the car and the keys and come back and have her be fully electric, and that possibility is there. So it remains your 1999 car, your 1979 car. It's just that from the fuel code will go from B or D for benzene or diesel to E for electric.
All right, so Ani just said that we can go for a little spin in the Jaguar. Of course, we're not going to turn that down. So how many kilowatts is it again?
So this motor itself is a 100 kilowatt peak system.
Okay.
About 45 kilowatt continuous.
Okay.
So even a heavy car like this, it can run, 110, 120 kilometers an hour continuously without any problem. But it has a little bit higher peak for acceleration and some giggles. And,
Some giggles.
Yeah, you gotta have the fun.
Do you see why I was so excited to visit Ane? What they're doing at New Electric is so incredible. They are breaking new ground. They are making it so that the next generation of people who want to do this are going to be able to do it so much easier because he's going through, do you realize all the technical things that he has to figure out to make that Jaguar run? It's not easy. It's not just like plopping in a motor and a battery. He had to figure out every single detail, and that is incredible. The brain power that it takes to do it, the enthusiasm, the energy, I'm just speechless after visiting him. I'm so glad that we got a chance to go to New Electric today. Thank you so much for coming along. Now you know. Yeah, he's so inspiring. This was just a short clip, but I think he should run for president because he really gets it, and he's doing such amazing work there. It's so fun to go to a place where there's just batteries everywhere and motors and cars up on lifts. It's really a lot of fun.
So similar to the autopilot accident, another Tesla news story that's been floating around the internet is this Shanghai battery fire, which seemed to have started for no reason. It got shared throughout the entire internet. Everyone's saying, oh my gosh, Tesla's just catch on fire for no reason.
Yeah, and I think we should go to Tesla for what their response is. They said, our team was on the site to offer support to our customer and establish the facts of this incident. We are glad that everyone is safe. While our investigation with authorities is ongoing, we have found that only a few battery modules were affected and the majority of the battery pack is undamaged. Tesla battery packs are engineered with the state-of-the-art design so that in the very rare instance a fire does occur, it spreads very slowly and vents heat away from the cabin, alerting occupants that there is an issue and giving them enough time to exit the vehicle. The safety of our customers is our top priority, and if we do identify an issue, we will do whatever is necessary to address it. We currently have well over 500,000 vehicles on the road, which is more than double the number that we had at the beginning of last year, and Tesla's team of battery experts uses that data to thoroughly investigate incidents that occur and understand the root cause. Although fire incidents involving Tesla vehicles are already extremely rare and our cars are 10 times less likely to experience a fire than a gas car, we believe the right number of incidents to aspire to is 0. As we continue our investigation of the root cause, out of an abundance of caution, we are revising charge and thermal management settings on Model S and Model X vehicles via an over-the-air software update that will begin rolling out today to help further protect the battery and improve battery longevity.
So there's a lot of things that I want to talk about here. First of all is statistics, which I know gets taught in schools, but is usually just like top about gumballs. Like, what are the chances of you getting a red gumball from the gumball machine? I don't know if you guys had like better math teachers than the majority of, it seems, all Americans and perhaps even other people in the rest of the world, but we're very bad as humans at understanding statistics. We are very easily led with anecdotes, I think because as humans, we're supposed to be in like smaller tribes, and an anecdote is supposed to be a pretty significant, like, oh, well, Johnny ate those berries and he died. I shouldn't eat those berries. They're probably poisonous.
Right.
So 10 times less likely to experience a fire than a gas car.
Well, and I think a lot of people would stop you at that point and go, well, if that was true, I'd be seeing fires all over the place. Yeah, you know what? It got so boring to show them on the news that they stopped putting them on the news.
Right. It's pretty rare that we see... there are still news stories of cars catching on fire, and usually journalists do a pretty good job of grouping them all together, being like, a lot of BMWs are all catching on fire in Korea.
Right.
I wonder what's going on. And that was a news story some months ago where hundreds of BMWs were catching on fire in South Korea.
Right. But, I mean, ICE cars, by their very nature, are carrying around a flammable liquid, and they catch on fire all the time, sometimes in an accident, sometimes not even in an accident.
Right.
That's what happens. And it's gotten so commonplace and so boring over the decades that we just dismiss it. So that when an electric car catches on fire, we're like, oh, that's a new kind of fire.
That's a new kind of interesting
I'd
story.
like to watch that.
Let's cover it.
Yeah.
And so it gets a lot more media attention than a normal gas car fire because... yeah, it is so commonplace and boring that we just don't hear about them.
Here's the other part. When a gas car does catch on fire, it can explode. And firefighters, if you watch them at any scene of a fire, they know that's going to happen. So they get ready for that to happen or try and keep it from happening.
Right.
With Teslas, the battery pack is designed, like they just said in the statement, to be thermally controlled if there is a fire. So you have time to get out of the cabin, and it's supposed to basically put itself out. So that's a huge difference. There may be a fire, but it's not usually going to lead to an explosion.
And lead to a death.
Right.
Which this fire did not lead to a death.
No.
It's just that it was caught on camera.
Right.
And is a very interesting media story, and so it gets covered. The other interesting point, the point that nobody talks much about, is that with a software update, over-the-air update, you don't have to bring it to a dealership and they have to replace anything or plug anything in. Over-the-air update, that risk, I guess, just got mitigated.
Right.
Most car companies, when they know that they have a problem with one of their cars of a certain model year, they don't fix it unless they have to fix it.
Right.
They do a cost-benefit analysis and they say, okay, what are the costs? How many people are going to die because of this problem?
Right.
And then they say, okay, and how much would it cost for us to fix it? And then they go, I'm not sure whether we're going to fix it or not because, I don't know, it would cost more money than it would be to just pay off the dead people's families.
Yep, that's easier.
That's easier. That's what we're going to go with. So those people will die, but we'll make our money. So it's all good in the end. I like that the Tesla spokesperson says that the ideal number of Tesla fires are 0.
Right.
And they're working towards that. This is a new technology. We've been making gas cars for like 100 years, and they still catch on fire.
Right.
You'd think we would have ironed out that detail by this point.
Right.
I guess it is pretty hard when you're pumping flammable and explosive liquid into a big tank in a car to keep it from catching on fire. I understand that. But lithium-ion batteries have not been in cars